Hey everybody, this is the second free training video that I'm creating. If you haven't seen the first, you can, it's on my YouTube channel. You can also go to my website, corymandell.net, go into the blog and you'll find it. And so the first training video is all about improving your writing style. And I like to call this the big why. And when I work with writers one-on-one and coach them through their process, this is often the very first exercise I'll have them do. It doesn't take very long. It takes most people 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour at the most, but it can have a real significant positive impact on your writing. And so the first part of this is spending a little bit of time doing doing something that will help you get out of your rational control ego mind and get to a very centered, authentic, emotionally open space where you can do some, personal inventory work and get absolutely honest, authentic answers. So, some people I've worked with, they would do a little bit of a meditation before they do this exercise. Some people might do yoga. I know someone who would pray. I know someone that played the guitar, someone who would take a warm shower, whatever it is, again, that you can do to help get out of your sort of everyday, normal, rational control ego mind and try to get to a very authentic, emotionally open space. Then you're going to ask yourself a very simple question and write out all the possible answers. Do a personal survey of all of the answers to a very simple question. And the question is, why do you want to be a writer? What is the completely honest answer or answers to why do you want to be a writer? And so I'm looking for you to write down completely 100% honest answers to why you want to be a writer. What are your reasons? What are your expectations? What are your hopes? What's your purpose? What's your motivation? And I know for some of you, one of the obvious answers is because it's how I make my living. You're staffed on a TV show, or you sold a pitch, or you've booked a feature assignment, and this is your paycheck. But there are other ways you could be making a living. Why is it so important for you to be a writer? Or think back to before you had a career and all that time and energy you put into writing. Why did you do it? What was driving you? What are the reasons that you want to be a writer? And for those of you who've not yet launched a career, same question. Why is this so important to you? Because none of us have to write. It's a choice. And the time and energy that we spend writing or pursuing a writing career is time and energy that we could be spending elsewhere. So we're choosing to do this. And the question is why? And I'm not looking for necessarily a singular answer. I'm looking for all the possible answers, all the motivations, all of the reasons. And some of the reasons and motivations might be really significant to you, and some might be very minor, like, well, the main reasons that I want to be a writer is this and this and this. But as I really do an honest survey, this is also part of it, and this is also part of it. So I'm not looking for just the most important reasons. I'm looking for all of the reasons. And if any of you are wondering, like, how many reasons am I looking for? I'm looking for all of the honest reasons, whatever that number is for you. I've done this exercise with writers, and in total, they have 3 or 4 reasons. I've done this exercise with writers, and they have up to 50 reasons. Last time I did this for myself, there were 23 reasons. So you can have as many or as few reasons as that are truthful to you. One of the things that's really important when I do this work with writers is I tell them, you're never allowed to share this list with anyone. The actual written list, you can't share it with anyone. Um, I'll certainly talk to the writer about some of the things that they have discovered, some of the more important motivations for why they want to be a writer. So if you're doing this exercise, obviously you can feel free to share, to talk about any of these reasons with anyone that you want. But I always insist that the writer never share the actual list. That's just for yourself. And the reason is for most people, it's easier to be completely honest and have no filters or um, not censor anything when you know no one's going to see this list. It's just you. Because while every writer is different and every writer is on their own journey, I've found in working with quite a few writers that most of them, when they do this work, when they start listing out the reasons, the motivations, their expectations, their hopes, what they're trying to get out of writing, why they're doing this, that there are a bunch of reasons that are healthy, positive, reasons that the writers feel proud of. But there also can be some reasons or motivations that maybe are not so healthy. Maybe they're not, you know, maybe they're almost, or maybe they're almost embarrassed or even somewhat embarrassed that these are some of the motivations. So the first thing is, again, in answering this question, why do you want to be a writer? You don't share the list with anyone, and you're just making a complete honest survey. And it doesn't matter how the number of reasons, it could be a small number, it could be a large number, just have to all be honest and authentic. And again, don't just focus in on what first occurs to you or what feels like the main reasons. Try to get a comprehensive list of reasons. And after you do this list, and again, most people maybe 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. But if you do this and then, a day or 2 or 3 days later, some more ideas occur to you, you can obviously add them to the list. And what can be really helpful, and the purpose of doing this exercise is, as you start to get a really good personal inventory of why it is you want to be a writer. For a lot of writers, there will be a lot of positive, healthy reasons. And knowing those can be really helpful to you in your writing. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But there also can, again, be some maybe not so positive, not so healthy reasons. And knowing those can be really helpful to you in your writing. So I want to give you some examples. So let's start with the negative, how potentially knowing some of the negative reasons or maybe less than healthy reasons that someone wants to be a writer, how this can be helpful to know that. And then I'll talk about how knowing the positive stuff can be helpful. Reason the director, the actors, whatever, it just doesn't work. And so there's so much that goes into a writing career that you have no control over. And, even the most amazing writers, their careers have high peaks and low valleys. It's just the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the industry. And I realized that it's really a bad idea for me to surrender my control to this industry and say people's reaction to my scripts and what happens to my writing determines on some level if I'm a good person, if I'm lovable, if I have worth. And so what became really important is to decouple this, to say, if I have a really bad writing day, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And if I have a really great writing day, it doesn't mean I'm a great person. And if my script is successful, it doesn't mean I'm lovable as a person. And if my script fails, it doesn't mean I'm not lovable. And I realized that, I needed to find other areas in my life to find my self-esteem and my confidence. And I shouldn't be looking to writing to be validating myself on a personal level, because there's so much to a writing career that you have no control over. And it is completely irrational to believe, I realize that how my, how a script is received and the feedback I get, again, if it's positive, that doesn't mean I'm this lovable, amazing person. And if the feedback is negative, it doesn't mean I'm unlovable. And I know for many of you, you're like, well, that's so obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. And it's not obvious to a lot of writers I work with. And so part of the reason of doing this exercise of why do you want to be a writer is you might realize that there are some personal things you're trying to get out of writing that maybe you want to decouple it from your writing. Just the things that you're trying to get personally, find other avenues to feel fulfilled, other avenues to feel validated, other avenues to feel loved. And then just treat writing as a creative journey, and you pour heart and soul into it. And sometimes the stars are going to line up and you're going to have amazing results. And sometimes, no matter what you do with your writing, just not going to get the results or the validation that you were looking for. And I've worked with a lot of writers who've been able to realize that there's some unhealthy reasons why they want to be a writer. There's some unhealthy expectations. I worked with a writer who had a lot of issues with his mother, and his mother wanted to be a writer but never really pursued it. And his mother didn't really pay a lot of attention to him. He didn't feel loved by his mother, except when he was writing. When he was writing, his mom would really engage with him and seem to really care about him and what he was doing. So he realized part of the reason he wanted to be a writer is it was a way to get his mom to love him. And then he realized that's crazy. Like, my writing isn't making my mom love me. And if my script is successful, it doesn't mean my mom loves me. And if my script isn't successful, it doesn't mean she doesn't love me. He was able to realize that it was this irrational belief that if he could be successful as a writer, he would get his mom to love him the way that he wanted his mom to love him. And that's just wasn't true. And making that realization helped release those expectations. And it helped him with his procrastination issues. And going back to me for a moment, when I realized those things and started to separate it, it took a lot of the fear away. It took a lot of the unhealthy expectations away. It took away some of the procrastination. I was more productive, and it also improved the quality of my writing because I didn't have all this unhealthy, unrealistic fear tied up with these unhealthy, unrealistic expectations. I mean, this is crazy time, but for me, one of the things I wrote down is one of my motivations for wanting to be a writer was I would write these big movies, and the kids that picked on me, who are now living these terrible lives of silent desperation, they would go to the movie theater and they would see these movies that I wrote, and they would be in awe of these movies, and they would see that I wrote those movies, and they'd be so jealous of me, and they'd be so ashamed that they picked on me, and they would feel so low, and they would think I was so great, and they would call me and they would apologize. I know this is insane, but it was one of my motivations. Like, it was like, I'm going to get back at those kids. I'm going to be a successful writer, and they're going to be in awe of me. And of course, the reality is, many of the people, many of the kids that picked on me, they might be living really fulfilled, completely happy, joyful, successful lives. And if I wrote a big movie and they went to the movie theater, the kids that picked on me, they're not the kind of people that probably sat around to see who wrote the movie. They probably don't even know who writes the movies. And even if they did see that I wrote the movie, they probably wouldn't remember me. But it was one of the crazy things I was holding on to. So part of the reason for doing this exercise is you might find that there's some unhealthy reasons why you want to be a writer, and knowing what those reasons are might help you start to separate that out from your writing and not put unnecessary and irrational expectations, and which will create irrational fears, which can muck up the process and can lead to fear that you don't need to have, procrastination, and or maybe just pulling your punches and not writing to the best of your ability. let's switch over and talk about how this is a helpful exercise for some of the positive reasons, the healthy reasons that people want to be writers. So let's talk about some of the positive reasons and how that can be helpful to really focus in on them and to really be clear about them. So this is one of my favorite stories. A couple years ago, worked with a writer. Let's call her Jane. That's not her name. And she came to me. So I tend to work with writers who are really struggling with story and story design. I also tend to work with writers who are struggling with their process. And Jane was really struggling with her process. And she's super bright. And it was really easy for her to read other people's work and have really smart notes, but it was really hard for her to work on her own stuff. She had terrible procrastination, uh, really had issues with confidence. And confidence is the wind in our sails. And when you start to lose confidence, it's hard to keep momentum and keep focused and keep working. And she was in a bad place. So, I asked her why she wanted to be a writer, and she said, I'm very drawn to creativity. I need to live a creative life. But, as we talked it through, there are other ways to be creative other than writing. And so I sent her home to, why do you want to be a writer? Why is this so important? And she had a lot of reasons, and some of them, again, weren't necessarily the healthiest. But there was one reason that we really focused in on. And so Jane's mom wanted to be a writer, but never really pursued it, never really thought she was good enough. Jane's grandmother actually wanted to be a singer and had a lot of talent, but never really pursued it. And so Jane felt like she comes from this family of women who have these dreams but don't feel confident enough in pursuing them, and don't really go after their dreams, don't really feel like maybe they're good enough to have their dreams. And Jane had two young children, a beautiful little boy and a beautiful little girl. And she was really worried that, that her kids, especially her daughter, would grow up and not feel confident in pursuing her dreams and not be able to live a completely fulfilled life. And so as we talked about it, what Jane came to realize is, as a parent, there's a lot of things you can do in what you tell your children and what you expose them to. But what's most important is what we model for our children. What children learn by watching us, and they learn from us. And Jane realized that what she was modeling for her daughter was the same thing what her mom was modeling for her, or had modeled for her, which is this: let the fear get in the way, let the lack of confidence get in the way. You can have a dream, but don't believe in yourself enough to really pursue that dream, because that's what was going on with Jane. And she was really terrified that that's what would happen to her daughter. And so Jane realized, what's so important for me is I have to write, and I have to just fully commit to writing, be all in with my writing, and not let my fear and insecurity and procrastination issues get in the way. Because no matter what happens, I will model for my daughter that when you have a dream, you commit and you 100% go for it, and you don't let insecurity or lack of confidence get in the way. And that's very powerful because, I've never met a writer that didn't struggle from time to time with insecurity, doubt, fear, ego issues. And so for Jane, what she realized is, whenever she was not feeling like she wanted to write, when she was feeling insecure, when she was lacking confidence, she would sit down and she would write her ass off. She would just completely commit to writing for her daughter. So it wasn't about Jane, it was about her daughter. And writing was what she was doing to be the best possible parent for her daughter. And the procrastination almost disappeared overnight. A lot of, when you listen to really smart people, religious people, spiritual people, psychologists, behavioralists, they'll tell you that one of the most powerful things to do in life is to be of service to other people. And a lot of very smart people will say it's the secret to happiness is to be of service to other people. And it's a great way to get out of ourselves when we're feeling, again, insecure, lack of confidence, procrastination, all of those issues that can sabotage us as writers. So for Jane, her writing was about an act of love for her daughter and to be the best possible parent for her daughter. And that was something that she was never going to waver on. And that made a huge difference. So this exercise led to that realization. And so this realization became her focus on her true motivation now to be a writer. She was writing for her daughter. And I worked with another writer, and they were a very intuitive writer. Now, many of you watching this video have worked with me or heard me talk about creative integration, which is the single most critical skill set for success as a writer. If any of you are watching this video and this is your first exposure to me, I would recommend at some point go to my website, corymandell.net, and go to the blog, and there's a free audio post on creative integration. I'd give that a listen when you have a chance. So this writer is very intuitive, and they loved their characters, and their characters were like real people, but they really struggled with structure and story design, like all intuitives do, all intuitive writers. And they really were lacking confidence and kind of been beaten up by the industry, and really finding it harder and harder to write. And so I asked them, well, you're choosing to still be a writer. Why do you want to be a writer? Gave them this exercise. Bunch of reasons came out, but one of the reasons that we focused on that was really helpful for this writer was that this writer, she loved her characters. Her characters were like real people. So there's this one character she was working with, and she realized that one of the reasons she wanted to be a writer is she was the only person in the world who could tell this character's story. She was the only person in the world who could give life to this character, who could allow this character to exist in our realities, in our imagination. She was the only person in the world. And so that was, to her, it felt like a really sacred responsibility. So again, she was now of service to her character. And when she didn't feel like writing and she was sabotaging herself and really struggling, she would just be very clear on, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do a good 2 hours and I'm going to write to the best of my ability, and I'm doing it for this character. And that made a huge difference. And not only did she become much more productive, but she also, her writing improved, because when we can get out of our ego and our fear and our insecurities and a lot of these unhealthy voices and motivations, when we can focus on something potentially outside of ourselves that really matters to us, it can take a lot of the fear and a lot of the sabotage out of the equation. I worked with another writer, a more conceptual writer who was having his own struggles. And one of the reasons that he wanted to be a writer, and he was a little embarrassed to say this because he felt like it was, maybe arrogant, but he's like, I really believe that stories make the world a better place. And, he pointed to a lot of TV shows and movies that really impacted on him as a kid, and how it can bring people together and it can teach people lessons and it can create empathy and understanding. And he's, look, he said, I'm not saying that the scripts I write are good enough to get made and make the world a better place, but it's one of the main reasons I want to be a writer is I want to try to make the world a better place, one story at a time. And so that's what we discussed that he would focus on, is that when he was having trouble and he was struggling, he would just realize, I'm going to go spend 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever his writing schedule was. I'm just going to be completely focused on doing this because this is my way of trying to make the world a better place. So what I'm asking you to do, if you will accept this mission, is answer the question, why do you want to be a writer? You could have as many or as few answers as honestly come up. Make that list. And you might want to look at that list of reasons and maybe separate them into healthier reasons and maybe less healthy reasons. And I'll say this, I've done this, I've had a lot of writers do this exercise. Um, I've never seen it not have some benefit to a writer. For some writers, they do this exercise and they get a little bit of benefit, and other writers get enormous benefit. But even if you get a little benefit and it can help you in some of your darker days, some of the days when you're losing confidence, procrastination, sabotage, or just overall can help improve your writing, even if it's just a little bit. This whole exercise probably doesn't take more than 30 or 60 minutes. So um, probably worth your while to give it a spin. And and then when you're done, check out the next video, which is the big what. And I think you're really gonna like that one. That's usually a lot of people's favorite exercise, the big what. That'll be the next one. And again, this is the second free training video. If you want to be notified when the next one or the next ones are posted, go to corymandell.net if you haven't already done so. Join the email list so you'll get a notification when the new videos are out. And also, you might want to, if you haven't already done so, check out the blog for some more free resources. And the only thing I ask is if you find any of these free training videos to be of help, please assist me in getting the word out, share it on social media or whatever, as we're all sheltering in place and dealing with the health crisis. I want to get these free resources out to as many writers as possible. So please help me in that. You and your loved ones stay healthy and safe. And I'll see you in the next free training video.